Okay, so we got our box like this, and again, I should not have rounded over the back edge, but I'll keep going with this one. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna create this right here, this detail. It's called a cove, and the cove, strangely enough, is cut on the table saw. So basically we're going to take this box and drag it sideways across this blade to make this cove. It's not the most intuitive way to use a table saw, but it does work. On my table saw, I have two little bolts right here that we're going to take out. This one and this one. So we're going to grab an Allen wrench out of the toolbox in the Allen wrench drawer and just pop these off real quick. And that's going to allow us to put in a little piece of plywood here to cut the cove. So what we're going to do as well is pull the riving knife off the back side of this table saw, and that's a pretty easy procedure as well. So put those aside. And when we pull the riving knife off, we're going to pull the throat plate out. So the throat plate comes off like this. You pull this little tab, that comes up. And then inside of here, there's a lever that pulls up. Lever pops up, and the riving knife is removed. So with the bolts out, riving knife removed, what we're going to do is grab my little plywood holder or plywood setup and set up for a cove. Alright, so this little thing here has got two rails that go into the miter slots, and the blade pokes up right in this hole here. And so about like that. So this blade's way too high for right now. We're gonna lower that down. Basically we want that blade to be just a bit higher than that plywood. So I'm gonna drop that blade down a little bit above. So I don't know, it's about a 16th, 32nd, maybe a half a 16th above that. Okay, so this is the hard part. The bottom of your project is going to ride on this fence right here, this wooden fence that we made, and we're going to drag it across this way. The tricky part about this whole procedure is you want that cove to be right in the middle between here and here. So what I'm going to do is real close. You can see that routed edge right there. It's kind of high, this little step. You can see where the wood's kind of clean, and then it kind of gets into the older looking wood. So I'm going to put a little line there as a reference, and again over here as a reference. And basically what I want to do is measure the halfway distance between here and here. So I'm going to measure that distance, divide by 2, and put a mark right there. And that's going to allow me to kind of line up my cove. And it's kind of a trial and error thing. It takes a little bit to get it just right. So I get 2 inches, so half of 2 is 1. So right there is the center, and that's my target. And again, it's going to take a little bit of practice or a little bit of trial and error to get that right. So I'm going to make a little mark to make that more apparent to us. So right there is where I want the middle to be. So I'm just going to start by eyeballing it here. So again, what I'm doing here is kind of getting my my blade, and I'm going to feel the blade, kind of feel where the high spot of that blade is. It's right there, the upper rotation of that blade. So the highest part of that blade cutting is right there. So I want that line to line up on that high spot. So let's see how I'm doing here. So I can see that it's not quite lined up. I'm going to bring the wood back a little bit. Oh no, I got to move this fence now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screw gun and adjust the fence a little bit. And before I do that, I'm going to take note of where my plywood is in relationship to the table saw. So right here, right there, I want to take a little mental note of where the plywood is. And so when I make my cut, I keep it in the same spot. So if it moves, that's not good. That's not good. I want it to be right there. And then I'll use the fence over here, and I'll push the fence hard against that piece of plywood, and that'll kind of help secure it. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my screw gun and my impact driver and make some adjustments to this fence so that that high point of that blade is more or less on that line. And then this does take a little bit of practice. I don't get it right the first time by any means. But I'm gonna try to move this fence. I'm just gonna unscrew one side and kind of use it as a pivot and line it up right there. So we'll try that. Not to say it's going to work, but it's a good starting point. Okay, so before I cut my actual piece of wood, what I'm going to do is grab a scrap piece of some kind of random material that I have. Probably 3/4 plywood was usually a good spot to pick. And then I'll do a test cut off of that. Try not to grab anything that's super nice. Alright, so I got this kind of a junkier looking plywood. I'm going to go to the chop saw and cross cut it and give it a shot, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I got my little piece of wood here. What I'm going to do is put a little B on the plywood here, and that little B tells me that's the bottom. So when I go to compare these, I don't want to confuse the top with the bottom, because I'm always going to reference off the bottom of the box, and that B represents the bottom. Put that against the fence, get my dust collectors on, and we'll make a test cut, see how I did. Gotta raise the blade up a little bit. And so there's my first test cut. You can see the start of the cove. It's not deep yet, because you can't cut all this cove off in one pass. You got to kind of sneak up on it. Do a little pass, raise the blade up, do a little pass, raise the blade up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball the center of that cove. Just try to concentrate and use and look at both sides. So right here, I have eyeballed what I think is the center of that cove, or the center of the marked table saw left. And then if that lines up with my line on the jewelry box, I'm ready to make my cut. If not, I gotta readjust it. So here's my bottom. I'm gonna put my bead that I made on the bottom of the jewelry box and see if my lines line up. Oh my gosh, first try. Play the lottery. Cool. So now I'm ready to make my cut. Okay, so let's not make that same mistake. I'm not gonna do the back, so I'm gonna put a little note to myself. No. So don't do the back. We're just gonna do the sides and the front. So what I'm gonna do, get the dust collectors back on, make my cut this way, make my cut this way, make my cut on my front. Always keeping the bottom against the fence. Make a first cut, double check it to make sure I'm in the zone, in the right area. Raise up my blade a little bit, make a cut, raise up my blade a little bit till I'm happy with my look of the box. So let me get that back on. That was a kind of a heavier cut, but it's redwood, so it's pretty soft. I should probably lower that down a little bit. That's a better cut right there. That's a good first cut. So it looks pretty good. I'll keep going here. All right, so I got my first cut made. I'm gonna raise up the blade just a little bit here. Watch how much I raise up this blade. I'm gonna grab my wheel and just kind of give it not even a quarter of a turn. A little bit goes a long way when you're raising your blade up like this. All right, so use your judgment here, kind of see what it looks like. I'm gonna go one more turn here. A little more. I think that's good. I can live with that. All right, so that's how to cove the jewelry box.